Well, I'm excited to dive into today's show. We're going to get caught up with myself and Dr. Smith and go on a very diversified journey into employee benefits with nothing necessarily pre-planned other than our own experiences and opinions. And that will be enough to fill an episode. So how are you, Trevor?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to learn from you on this topic as well as contribute my biased opinions.
Yeah, great. And I will learn something from you as well, because I know the hows, I guess, but we always learn when we hear other perspectives. And I think I know what might be good, bad, valuable, pros, cons to some people, but I'd love to hear your take on it. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube or listening to snippets or checking it out on just the audio podcast, this is the time where you can start to pull up the comments and get some interaction and let us know what you think, what questions you got, what the heck are some of the things we're talking about. So keep that open. This is not a live show, but we are going to respond to comments as soon as we possibly can. And whether we agree with you or not, or have the answer or not, we're going to let you know that. So employee benefits. What are employee benefits? I'll preface with that, and then we can start on a little bit understanding employee benefits. So the gist of it is employee benefits, or you'll also hear the term group benefits, group insurance, group disability, group life, whatever, all these other kind of things. It basically means an employer has enough people, enough employees to go and get discount rates and on insurance products, get guaranteed insurability on most things because they have a large enough sample size. So they'll get discounts, and then they'll also typically pay a portion. Not always. You have to understand throughout this whole conversation that not all employers include any or all the benefits that we talk about. There's no hard and fast rule necessarily until Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. And there were some rules about if you have a certain size number of employees, you have to have a certain type of health insurance and et cetera.
If I could jump in just from a higher level, like as a potential employer, almost employer looking at starting my own practice here in ophthalmology, the ones I hear about are retirement. And then there's like the insurances. You're talking about the insurances, life insurance, disability insurance. There's lots more down the line from that. Those are the top, and then health insurance, right? So those are the top three. Just wanted to throw that out there. Those are the main ones people talk about or interested in. They're probably the most common ones would be health insurance and retirement, like a 401k, either access with or without a match. Yeah, just wanted to give those categories for folks.
That's exactly it. Those are some of the main examples of things that we see. To give us some context for your thoughts and opinions, Trevor, catch us up on what's going on with you right now, and that'll help us to kind of set the table.
Yeah. So I've been a W-2 employee. I'm an associate ophthalmologist at a small private practice. I've been there for the last 9 months. It's been great, personally, professionally, learned a lot about myself. I mean, it's not just a job for me, ophthalmology. It really is like my mindset on it has shifted quite a bit in the last couple of years. Like I really do see it more as, I wouldn't call it like a calling, but like it's a greater purpose for me to go to work. It's impacting the lives of the people around me, both my staff and my patients. And this is where I find myself. So I'm kind of in a different headspace on wanting to just be more intentional about the people I'm around. It's made it a lot more fun. So I've been enjoying my work. So I'm a W-2. I'm working about 35 hours a week on average. So it's not the heaviest, most intense medicine job. And then I'm doing a little bit of locums coming up here too. Helps bump up the income a little bit since I'm working a small amount of full time. So I'm wearing the hat of like potential future employer, and then I'm also an employee. And then I've popped around at a couple private practices, which I've talked about in the past on previous episodes. So I've like seen a few different options, but yeah, it's usually for docs that are listening. It's usually, 401k with matching that starts about a year into employment. It ranges from 1% to maybe 8%, seems like. Kaiser Permanente, I looked at position there a while ago. Some of them, they'll bump it up quite a bit more. They're really trying to keep you attached. They're trying to give you golden handcuffs.
And a lot of that golden handcuffs is they'll put a vesting schedule, which we can go into, but it basically means you don't get to take your match with you if you leave for anywhere between 1 to 5 years on a 401k.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's a great bonus. I mean, you definitely make more per dollar of production. So you're only doing so much work and you get to keep more of the money in that format. If you're like a long-term lifer, you kind of more of a corporate person, which you can only find out by experience as a doctor.
Yeah.
Very few people are like working their way up the ladder and then going to medical school and they're like, oh, I'm a corporate guy. Maybe some of the military types, that's a nice natural fit. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm wearing 2 hats and looking at having at least 1 employee coming up for at least one of the companies, either in ophthalmology or the kind of Bitcoin business stuff I'm working on. I need more help. I don't have the bandwidth to keep up what I'm doing with everything. So wherever I bring them on, I'm like, oh man, everybody wants benefits and I want to build a team that wants to stay, right? So I'm not afraid of offering benefits. Not to jump into my hot take too early, but basically I'm kind of amazed. I think people are just have read articles online like ask for benefits, like benefits are the holy grail of employment. Um, I feel like I could offer somebody double what they would actually take home in terms of their benefits, and they would turn the job down. Basically, they would take a lower paycheck and the worst benefits versus a higher paycheck and no benefits.
Why do you think that is? Does it just give them some sort of
I
sense
don't
of?
know. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on it because it doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm financially literate. I wonder if there's an illiteracy component of they don't know what they don't know and they just kind of heard like
Sure.
you got to get benefits. Benefits is a good job, you
I could
know.
see that mantra in America, especially from the previous
Yeah,
generation, our parents growing up and saying, get a job with good benefits or whatever.
right.
But I think some of the psychology behind it is you get this salary, but also when they're doing the recruiting or interviewing, here's this whole list of free stuff that you get, and everybody
Yeah.
likes free stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of like,
Yeah, I do think so.
I think there's some of that. Like open up a checking account at our bank and you get a free coffee mug.
Yeah, so I'm looking at hiring an amazing employee. I'm like super pumped to have heard about him. Really well trained ophthalmology technician who has like interests outside of eyes. So I'm really excited and I plan on employing this guy if possible. He would be better off. Like I'm gonna do the benefits, right? I'm gonna give him what he wants because I want to hire him, right? My goal is
Sure.
have this guy work for me. My goal
And
is
that's
not
the
like,
great thing about your first employee is you
yeah,
can just say, what kind of benefits do you want?
yeah, right. It's totally true. I mean, I think with benefits, you have to match like there's no favoritism allowed. I'm sure there's probably ways around this, but I'm not aware of what they are. So you have to have the same benefits for yourself. Now that you have employees, you can be your own employee. Somebody else can be your employee. And I'm learning about this. So color me naive on the details, but you got to share the same thing. So if I want to have a good healthcare plan and I'm hiring him, he gets a good healthcare plan, which makes it a little more expensive. I
Yep.
think that's, where it gets tricky and people want to save on stuff. I don't really care. My attitude is if this person is contributing and I'm productive, I will out earn the front end cost of giving someone what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And especially nowadays, it's hard to hire good people. So if you find a good person, you want to make it worth their while, right? So
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, so it's just my observation is like, oh man, I would love to like educate him on like, dude, you could be 1099 and then a consultant and then you can write off all your stuff but like that's me. That's like my interest. That's me as an employee,
Mm-hmm.
That's not my employees. So like I want to meet them where they're at. And I think that'll be like a 401k, maybe a match and figuring that out. So I'm hiring a consulting group to help me with a lot of this. So when I
Yep.
say I don't know exactly what I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
next, that doesn't mean I have no plan. My plan is hire smarter people than me
There you
as
go.
consultants.
That's
So I'll have
it.
insights on this that are more detailed in the future, but that's my context so far
Awesome.
as like,
Yeah. So that's kind of the employer side. And especially at the starting out point, we don't get to hear that very often. We might hear, here's what we
mm-hmm,
offer. We might hear, here's what I want. But it's interesting to hear it
mm-hmm,
from your end of the startup. Okay, I'm just beginning to think about benefits. I know this guy
mm-hmm,
wants benefits. How do I go about finding those? And we know we don't have a ton of employers listening to this show. Y'all are mostly employees. I think the show tends to appeal to residents, young physicians that are stuck with whatever benefits they get. But quick sidebar for those of you that are employers or want to be, or a 1099. Some of these things you kind of got to piece together, but there are some firms, groups that will do everything: the health, the 401k, the group life, the group disability, kind of do a whole benefits package for you. Let us know. I'm sure we can get referrals for you if you're that person, but that's our little business owner corner there. But for most of you getting employee benefits, there's a few basic things to know. Number one, you don't get to decide unless you're so fortunate that you're Trevor's first employee. Then you do get to pick a little bit. But ultimately, it's up to the business owner, the employer. Let's say you're at a hospital, it's up to the CEO or the board or whomever is figuring that out. This is what they have. It applies to pretty much everybody, and you have hardly any choice on the matter. Now, they'll give you options sometimes. So let's take it from the top, and the most common being health insurance that might be offered somewhere. There are often, I see 2 or 3, sometimes more, but options of what health insurance you want to take. And without getting too deep into a health insurance segment, we can do that in another show. But with health insurance, so the first thing you look at is how much does it cost, or the last thing, but how much does it cost me? How much is the employer going to cover? The employer may cover some of it, or all of it, or none of it. Either way, the total cost is going to be cheaper typically than if you went out and got it on your own. Of course, there's subsidies and things like that, but most of us are not going to qualify for those. So now you have these options to pick from. They vary in price, but they also vary in a couple of things. They vary in deductible, so the amount that you'll have to pay before the insurance kicks in. They vary in copay amount or co-insurance, and they vary in out-of-pocket max. So between the deductible and the copay, combine those possibilities together, and they give you a worst-case scenario, which is called an out-of-pocket max. It's the most that you would have to pay per year, no matter what. So you look at that number, and some of them may be a PPO, which is your pretty standard health insurance, and within those, you can have an HSA, or a high deductible health plan, which means you can have a health savings account. What you need to know about that is if you've got a deductible that's over, I think, $1,500, may have changed this year, but you have what's literally technically known as a high deductible health plan, which means you can get an HSA with it, which here at FinancialMD, we think HSAs are awesome. They're, for all intents and purposes, triple tax-free. They're tax deductible going in, so you can tell your company, out of my paycheck, I want a certain amount going into an HSA. As of this year, the max you can put into an HSA is like $7,300 a year, I think. So you go that, it goes
with
pre-tax.
For two of you. For
family and singles, like half that. And so you get that taken out of your paycheck before taxes, so it's pre-tax. Then what's cool is if you get over $1,500, $2,000 maybe or something, you can get, for most HSAs, they allow you to pick investments inside of it. So then it becomes kind of like this retirement account. So if you really stock that thing full and you don't use much of it, whatever's left over rolls over each year. It's just like an investment account, and it grows like a 401k. And we've helped a lot of our clients pick the investments in their HSA, hoping that there'll be money left over in there at the end of the year, and grows every year, tax deferred, like a 401k or an IRA. We've talked about these tax deferred bucket before. But then, as long as you use it for health expenses or medical expenses, it is tax free. And so I talk to our clients about the option of, hey, let's max out this HSA and hope there's money left over and growing every year, because when you get to retirement, now you can use it along the way, obviously, for healthcare expenses, what it's meant for. But if we grow extra in there as well throughout the years, you could have $100,000, $200,000 in here of tax-free money for your healthcare and retirement. And we're all going to have a lot of healthcare expenses in retirement. So that gets me excited.
The HSA is it feels like a hack, like a financial hack. It's like a little secret.
Yeah, I'll be like, hey, do you have access to an HSA? And I've even had some of my high-income surgeons like switch their health plan to the HSA option. They pay less monthly premium, but the deductible's higher. But man, the tax savings on that when you're in the 35% tax bracket is really nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just switched to an HSA a month ago.
Yeah.
And
And you probably got Bitcoin in
yeah,
it, don't you?
I have Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. That's true, I do. That's which
Yeah.
is like arguably the worst investment vehicle of all time.
Grayscale? Oh, yeah, that's awful.
And I do not even remotely recommend it.
No,
Um,
no. That was my first foray into helping clients into getting some kind of
yeah,
Bitcoin exposure, and it bit us in the ass.
it's probably better than nothing, but yeah, it's been painful. That's a whole aside, but
Mhm.
it's a very mismanaged, closed end trust,
Yeah.
rife
But
with controversy as well. So it's not my favorite, but I do own a little tiny bit.
yeah, it's like the easy button, and I own some
Mhm.
too because I just can't bear to sell it with as much as I've lost over the last 2 years.
That's exactly, I know it's not my shining example of my investment abilities, but
No. And I mean, it's
it's
so many, you've got so many options for doing Bitcoin in an IRA now that it's
yeah, there's so many companies. Swan Bitcoin, which I love,
Mhm.
great company, ethical group. They really help people to be educated on Bitcoin even before buying it. I mean, they're not trying to just like make a buck off you. And they have an IRA option now too. But yeah, GBTC, if you Google it, it's a ticker symbol, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Really, there's just a lot of articles about they're one of the companies that with Gemini is owned by the Winklevoss. They're the
The
Winklevi.
Winklevi.
They're yeah, it's a pretty well regulated exchange,
I agree.
and
Yeah.
I think they disclosed it fairly, but like people lent out their digital assets for a yield return,
Guilty.
and it oh yeah. So
Yeah, I
I
haven't seen
did
my Ethereum in
temporarily.
a long time.
I pulled mine out. They did a great job. They said like this is being lent out. Like this is not in our control.
Yeah.
I felt like there was full disclosure. Just like when I put my money in a bank, I'm probably more educated than the average individual for sure, just out of
Probably.
my own curiosity. But if I did, which I don't, but if I had over $300,000, in the bank in a checking account, I wouldn't expect FDIC or anybody to cover me for more than 250. Like that's the rule.
Yeah.
So I know that the bank is like a hedge fund that just plays with people's money. I understand I could lose that money if I put it in there, which is why I don't. The same thing goes for Gemini. But anyways, they lent out that money to Genesis Group, which they own Grayscale. I don't exactly remember which one's above which one, but they're all together. And there was a lot of lending that went on, and they're the reason lots of things blew up last year. Lots of
With
companies and
FTX and
exchanges and
yeah.
FTX, and yeah, they lent to them. And it's real sketchy. So I don't love Grayscale, but it's hard to get. MicroStrategy is another nice one if you're like a stock person or if you're in an HSA. Like I use Lively and they
For
connect
the
with
HSA.
TD. Yeah, from my HSA,
Mhm.
I use Lively as the account. Depending on what one you have, like it doesn't have to be with your health insurance or with whatever bank they
Yep.
default to. So I use Lively, and then they, because of ease of transfer to TD Ameritrade to
Mm,
trade within that account. And I don't
yeah.
really trade; I just like buy a few things, but that's why I'm in Grayscale. I'm basically like just really wanting to make excuses and defend myself for why I own a Grayscale because it's kind of
That's totally fine.
embarrassing.
That's what the show is all about. Yeah. We'll explain what we do and,
Yeah,
and mistakes we made. And we'll
yeah.
try to
So
have links to all this stuff in the show notes too. So with the disclaimer, obviously none of this is financial advice. We're just telling you what we're doing. So
yeah, and I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't give
you
any
can't get in
anyways.
trouble.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's the HSA. Really cool option if you can get it and it makes sense for your tax bracket income level. But I
Yeah.
think, when you're looking at health insurance as well, if you've got the option to pick within your employee benefits, you may have pre-existing conditions that you'll want to see what's covered. And some of the options you've got may cover this and some don't. And, this particular doctor you like, and those are the kind of questions
hmm
you want to look into. So that's kind of the gist of the health insurance side of things. You got anything to add?
No, I think there's the FSA as well, which is another spending account. Some accounts have
Yeah.
that. It's either or. I don't think there's such thing as an account. I'm not an expert on health insurance by any means, but in looking for myself, I don't think they ever occur together. It's FSA or HSA. FSA has to be spent by the end of the year as it currently stands and has been in the past. So that's different than an HSA, and I don't think
Yep.
there's any investment vehicles for that reason with an FSA.
Yeah.
Similarly, it's just sometimes with an FSA you actually get a stipend though, like you might get $1,000 or something in an FSA account with a certain company. There's no such thing as like a rule where HSA is always the best.
Mhm.
Sometimes the deductible is too high, and if you need to use your health insurance a lot, if your employer offers a $6,000 deductible or a PPO with just payment as you go, why am I forgetting the term? When you go in and you just pay the doctor a fixed amount. I keep
Oh,
like
copay?
blanking on. Yes, thank you. I'm a
Uh-huh.
doctor. I should know my copays.
Doctor.
I'm just like blanking on the term copay. Yeah, so copays can be nice with different plans, and then you don't have as high a deductible and all that kind of stuff. So there's different thoughts on that. It's a tough decision because the person who's advising you is often, if you're in a small practice, it's just your in-house person that just coordinates with the plan provider. So this is where a financial advisor can actually be very helpful if they want to like look over your health plans and your utilization of the health plan in the past and help you make an informed decision. Because maybe
And
if
this
you're a
is,
urologist, it doesn't matter. You're making 700K. If it's 2,000 a year or 10,000 a year, you might not really care if you're that guy. But if
mhm.
you're making regular doctor money like 220, 250, it can be a huge difference in how much you're putting away into retirement per year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if you're asking a financial advisor, again, I mean, this is general advice, but get a CFP because they're going to be at least educated and
Yeah.
trained in insurance and benefits. So you should be able to, especially if you're paying them a fee, take it to them and say, advise me on this as well, assuming they're doing
Yeah.
holistic financial planning.
Yeah, that's a really good point because like you might have a financial advisor assigned to you or like
Mhm.
available to you because you work at the hospital and they partner with Northwestern Mutual or something, and
Right.
they're just like assigned to your account. Like they don't care if they're going to save you some money, you know. So
So that's health insurance. I'll say one last thing on the HSA. The employers sometimes will do not a match, but they'll put a stipend or a direct contribution into your HSA every year as well. So something to ask, maybe something to
mm-hmm.
negotiate. I don't know.
Yeah.
And all this comes back to us trying to get you guys to take advantage of free money that's on the table or understand. Let's say you're coming out of residency or fellowship and you're looking at two different job offers that the dollar amounts, the salary might be the same, but the benefits are very different. Understand there's value in those benefits and it's all part of the compensation package. And so if you are unaware of that, you might, be kicking yourself thinking, shoot, or I thought I took a little bit higher pay in this one, but it turns out the benefits were so good at the other one, they outweighed it. So keep that in mind. All right. On the retirement plan side, I'll kind of cut to the chase of what I hear questions either from clients or in lectures or dinners that we do just all across the board. There's 401ks and there's 403bs. Now, there's also 457s and 401as in those. I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. If you have something, you're going to at least have a 401k or a 403b. The main difference is a 403b is typically government or nonprofit. 401k is typically for profit, usually. There's no difference to you as the employee. For all intents and purposes, same rules, same tax implications, same investment options, same limits, annual limits, all that kind of stuff. So we'll just get that out of the way. But between different companies, different providers, different platforms, they can vary greatly in the investment options you have, whether a company matches at all, when you're eligible to start. You could start day one sometimes. Sometimes they make you wait a year. Usually they make you wait a year. If they match, or if they do a straight defined contribution. Defined contribution means it's not a match. They're just going to do, let's say, 4% a year for you. And then sometimes they'll put a match on top of that. So a defined contribution is not contingent on what you put in, but a match is. They're only going to put a match in if you put some in. And there's different formulas for that. There's no rule. So get up to speed on what that is. Again, the match and the defined contribution, like Trevor was saying, those are real dollars. So consider that part of your salary. So when you're comparing some different job offers, if there's a match or a defined contribution into your 401k, that's money. You don't have options on where you can hold your 401k typically. They say it's going to be here at Vanguard or Fidelity or Transamerica or wherever, which is fine. And your employer will also pick the investment lineup options that you have to pick from. By default, you're typically going to be put in what's called a target date fund. It's based on your age, assuming you retire at 65. Let's say, I'm 39. It's 2023 now. So I'll be 65 in 2048. Right? Yeah. So then my target date fund, they usually go every 5 years. So it might be 2045 or 2050. It'll say on the name of that target date fund, which means the manager inside that fund, way in the back end, back in New York City, is managing it to be aggressive now when they know you're 25 years away from retirement, to conservative as you get closer to try to hold on to your money. And we've kind of talked about that in the past, of aggressive versus conservative, risky versus stable, etc. But just want you to know that's what they're going to put you into by default, unless you pick something else. My encouragement to you, if you're young and listening to this, which you probably are, pick something else. And just last night, I was sitting with one of my clients and realized we hadn't changed their 401k investments. Him and his wife were both in a target date fund. One was Vanguard, one was Transamerica. And they were fine. Sometimes they're low fees. Typically, they're higher fees because they're actively managed. And so what I did for both of them is we just went in and picked an S&P 500 index fund, because they're like 35 or 36 and they got 30 years until retirement, and it's cheap. And that's one thing I know. That's one thing we could control, was the fees. So we picked that or VTI or something. And I said, just leave it here for a few years, 10 years, whatever, and then we'll reassess. Plus, the target date funds are never all equity. They're always going to have, no matter how young you are, some like bond and fixed income exposure. These guys at age 35, they had 10% in bonds, which I don't think there's a reason to have any bond exposure unless you're within 5 to 10 years of retirement. But that's just my general opinion.
That's interesting. How do you read that? Is this like specific to them with this couple? They just seem like more traditional investors. They want to set it and forget it. Is that?
Yeah, and their 401k, yeah. They were kind of, and I've done some where we'll spread it out a little bit. If I see some good, cheap indexes and options for them, they didn't have a ton. I saw, well, we've got a good, Vanguard 500 index fund. But honestly, so I'll tell you, here's what I can give you. It's not advice, but here's how I advise myself. I'm kind of trying to shoot for the moon still at this point. So I'm in like small cap, international emerging markets, like stuff that does well over the long term. Now there's some extreme fluctuation. I could be down 30% one year. I don't care.
You'll trade volatility for long-term performance.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you know you won't sell.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I've made mistakes and sold too soon on some stuff. And maybe that'll be a fun show. We can kind of peel back the onion on our own investments. And boy, that'll be kind of weird. Wouldn't that be interesting? Feel kind of exposed.
Yeah, that'd be interesting for sure. I'm willing to listen to you go through that if you want to.
Yeah, sometimes I'll be honest, there's not a real rhyme or reason to it other than I've got some individual holdings. So I have a SEP IRA because I'm a business owner, and I don't make enough to do a solo 401k, but that's another conversation. But as I think through it, I've got some interesting holdings. Like I've got one pharmaceutical company that I know a little bit about that I'm just kind of riding that one. I've got a exchange traded note that's covered calls on US oil index, which is, again, super random stuff I would never advise anybody on. But if you're curious, I'll show you, with the preface, this is not financial advice. But that's fun. It is fun being an advisor and knowing more than most and then playing around in your own accounts.
Yeah, you just do it with small amounts, I imagine.
Yeah.
At that point, you're like hobbying, and
it is.
You want to, people can do what they want with their money, but if you're trying to build wealth, it has to be very, very small quantities and equated, depending on like what your level of experience is. If it's minimal, like most people trading for fun on Robinhood, that falls it's not considered by the government gambling, but it becomes it pretty fast. If you're trying to build wealth over the long term, protecting your capital is rule number one, but you learn to protect your capital by practicing and by making mistakes. So when
Yeah.
you're young, it's the best time to be losing money or thinking you have a higher risk tolerance. Like you just
Hmm.
mentioned, 30% drawdowns. I think the average person can handle like 15%, maybe. I don't know if they've done studies on this, but just ballparking it, I'd say most people can handle 15% drawdowns. And like maybe once a decade, their whole portfolio that maybe they can handle 30% drawdowns. But we're hitting 30+% in 2008, 9. And I know not an insignificant number of doctors specifically who pulled out everything and got out of, quote unquote, got out of the market. And then we had
Yeah.
the biggest bull run in history for 12 years in a row. And then, some of them got into, say, silver or gold or precious metals. And now those are going on a run. So it's
Yep.
like, were they wrong? It's
Hmm.
super interesting because it's always just like, what's your time horizon?
Yep.
Performance is always start date and end date. And you got
Yeah,
to compare
exactly.
apples to apples. And
Yeah.
so you can be a genius one year and you can be the greatest fool the next year, just depending on how you look at your time horizon. And
It's all on paper until you
yeah,
sell it, right? Your losses are only on
you're right.
paper.
The volatility is such a individual thing, which is what makes financial advising so interesting as a profession, which you're in and I'm not. So I get to be Monday morning quarterbacking
Yeah.
24/7. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell
but
you,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
we're obviously we're digressing on this, so we'll come back to it. But to help with myself, I set up, you got to understand the psychology and
Hmm.
know yourself well enough to know to not get into it, not get overconfident for one. And when I buy something, I kind of have in mind where I want it to hit when I'm comfortable selling it, you
Hmm.
know, and that kind of stuff. And I
Hmm.
love, like, once a year I dump in some money at tax time for my SEP IRA because my CPA says, here, if you don't want to pay a huge amount in taxes, you need to put this much in a SEP IRA. So it's okay. So I do that, and then I'll have a bunch of cash sitting in the IRA, and that's when I can play with stuff or find something that I think is low and buy it and see how it goes over the next 6 to 12 months or something. But
Hmm.
if not, and this is a 39-year-old talking, I've got a good chunk of money sitting in Schwab's money market that's paying 4.65% right now. Like,
Yeah,
that's
you and
fine.
everybody else, I think.
Yeah, that's okay too. Anyway, 401k, 403b, you might get a match, you might get a defined contribution. These, same thing, it's tax deductible or pre-tax going in, unless you're doing a Roth 401k option, which may be a good option for you. That's up to you. And there's also after-tax contributions, which I'm not going to get super into that, but it's kind of the middle ground between pre-tax and Roth dollars. So you can put after-tax contributions. So those are tax-free forever, but then the growth on those will be taxed. Some plans may offer that option, some may not, but the rules on a 401k, you can take out a loan on your 401k. That can be nice if the plan allows it. And you can't take the money out without paying taxes plus a 10% penalty before you're 59 and a half. Those are a huge piece of your financial plan and can give you a huge boost because that defined contribution the employer may make, the match that they may offer, the low fees that they may have, all those things can make or break a retirement plan. If you're planning for retirement and looking at what if I put in a 401k with no match or contribution, and what if I put money into a 401k with a match and contribution, how does that look over 30 or 35 years? Could be really good. So you got to evaluate that and figure that out for yourself. So besides retirement plans and health insurance, there are several other ancillary benefits, you might call them. Group life insurance is one. Again, pretty basic. You'll get life insurance as long as you're at the employer. They typically cover a multiple of salary. The reason they say that is because everybody's got a different salary and everybody's got a different benefit amount based on their salary. Instead of offering everybody $100,000, they may say, well, we know, as we've told you here at FinancialMD, you should have 8 to 10 times your income in life insurance. And so when it comes to employee benefits, then you're able to kind of gauge that because they'll offer 1 time salary to, I've seen 4 or 5 times salary in life insurance. And there may be a cost to it. There may not be. Usually they've got like basic, they'll call it basic life insurance. And then they've got supplemental that you may have to pay a little bit for, but it's not much. And so I don't think I would be out of line in recommending that you get as much life insurance as they'll offer you, even if you have to pay a few bucks, because it's going to be typically cheaper than you'll find it anywhere else. Now, every once in a while, an employer will offer a life insurance policy like a whole life or a universal life that you can take with you. I don't know if that's a good idea or not for you, but I don't see it very often. I did have one client at Ochsner in New Orleans hospital system down there that they offer a group variable universal life insurance policy, which was interesting. That's a policy that can build up cash value and be invested in the market inside of it. But other than that, I don't see that kind of stuff very often. So you may also see child and spouse life insurance, and that can be nice. Again, just stuff that's free or cheap that is part of most financial plans. You need life insurance for the most part, especially if you got dependents or people that depend on you for finances. There's really not much other flexibility when it comes to group life insurance or employer provided life insurance. I will tell you it's typically, again, a piece of your life insurance. My general recommendation is get enough life insurance outside of work, so just term life insurance, so that if work took those away or you lost your job, which they can, you've still got enough life insurance outside of that.
What do you think about locking in your health on life insurance before you have dependents?
I typically think it's a good idea.
I haven't done it personally, but I feel kind of silly
Well, there you
for
go.
not
This is
having done
financial
it.
advice for Trevor then. Get some term life insurance.
I haven't done it because I don't have dependents, and I've got enough money set aside that would my family could bury me. It wouldn't cost them. You know,
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely not quote unquote self-insured
Yeah.
life insurance wise, because some people they get to like net worth of a few million bucks and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
do we need another million
Just
bucks
extra
when I
money.
die?
Yeah.
You know, but it's only like what, maybe $1,000 a year or something, and
Yeah.
your
I mean,
partner
let's say
would get
you
an
got $1
extra
million
million.
of 20-year term. It might be 70, 80 bucks a month. Yeah. $1,000 a year. So
Yeah. So it's
that's what
20
I
grand
assume.
over your lifetime to cover your partner for $1 million, you know, at whatever point. I don't know. That's in the personal category, I guess, like all this, but it's interesting to think about. If I ever have $1 million, then maybe I can think about it. In the meantime, I should probably lock in my health and get some term.
That's what I'm saying. Even 500,000 or $1 million will make a difference if you end up needing it one day.
Yeah,
But
pay off a
typically,
house or something.
right. Yep. And
Yeah, it's a good
for
idea.
most people, like I said, 8 to 10 times your income is what you want to shoot for total. The vast majority of that in individual term that you went and got out on your own. And then the perks you have at work are just that. They're perks that they're nice and they're extra, and you'll be glad you have them if you're dead. But it's life
Your family will
insurance.
be glad. You'll be
Your
dead.
family will be glad. You'll be dead. I don't know how you're going to feel. That's another episode for another time on philosophy and religion.
Yeah, that's right.
Lastly, we're
Nice.
going to touch on disability insurance. You know how we feel about disability insurance here at FinancialMD. Get it as soon as you possibly can. This is, I'm talking to you, med students and first year residents. Here's one of the dumber things that I often hear. Well, I've got disability insurance through my residency program. Yeah, you do. And this isn't dumb, it's just ignorant because you just don't know. I get it. That goes away when you leave residency, and you've got 100% chance you're going to leave residency. So you got to get something while you're young and healthy and cheap. I think we've sent that message enough. If it's your first time listening, get disability insurance. Shoot us a message and ask us about it. Either Trevor or I. We love talking about it, and it's super important. And you'll hear that everywhere, from us to the white coat investor to the physician philosopher to anybody. So get it.
Yeah, it is the most no-brainer purchase of your life that everyone puts off for no good reason. Like we all put off lots of other important things.
Yeah.
because you're insuring your car right now in case it dies. It's probably, if you're in med school, your car is probably only worth $10,000 to $15,000 max,
Max,
and
yeah.
you're paying like $1,200 a year if you've got cheap insurance
Yep.
on that. And this is like in med school, it's going to be maybe $50 to $100 a month, something like that. And then in residency, it might be, yeah, probably similar. And then you get
Yep.
out in practice, it's typically 1 to 2% of whatever you're making at the time. So it's super cheap. It's not going to have a long-term financial impact. Just like if you wouldn't have worked a summer job when you were 16 years old and you made like maybe $1,000 in the summer, you traded your whole summer for $1,000. Well, in residency, you can trade $500 to $800 a year and lock in your health and make sure you're protecting your income, which is probably worth $15 to $20 million over your
That's
lifetime.
pretty good numbers.
So
Yep.
it is the best trade if you're on Robinhood and you don't have disability insurance and you're a resident or a med student. You are making the worst trade. I mean, the best trade of your life is locking in your career. And it could, I've said this before, it should be called income insurance. It
Yeah.
should be called income insurance. You're insuring your income. It's the trade of a lifetime. I mean, you will never out trade that on Robinhood or with Bitcoin or anything.
What's interesting is even in the last month, I've seen an article from the physician philosopher about the not getting disability insurance is one of the worst financial decisions. And then I just did a lecture for McLaren's OB program in Lansing. And during my Q&A at the end, they said, what's the most common financial mistake you see? Which is a really interesting question. I don't get that.
That's a good question.
I said, this may seem odd, but it's probably not getting disability insurance because I've been doing this long enough that I've seen enough
100%
residents or attendings wait, and then they go to get it and they either can't get it or it's got exclusions on certain body parts or things that they're screwed. Honestly, I've had multiple residents try to get it. Oh, wait until I go into practice and I've got some money. I can't afford it right now. Okay. So we do. And then they get a decline letter and then they're fucked, for lack of a better word, because now their income is exposed. Because once you're declined, that goes on your record.
It's very hard to get it again in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you got COVID. Everybody's depressed, anxious, and then substance abuse rates are like through the moon, or through the roof. Maybe they're through the moon, and they're through the roof. It's really, I mean, and it's affected healthcare workers probably more than the average individual. It's like you gotta think about life is hard. I mean, and things happen outside of your control. What you can control is getting insurance. I mean, your anxiety level will go down, I guarantee, if you get disability insurance because you are setting yourself up to have a safety net. Your family might not be your safety net. Your own abilities, which have carried you so far, are unlikely for 100% of the population to be their safety net. You know, a lot of people struggle with health issues, and just to know that you're covered it's peace of mind. I highly, highly recommend it. I have had friends thank me for helping them take this step because they put it off and they just feel like stable and rock solid for their family's future because of just this simple step. It's not tough to get it. The longer you wait, definitely the harder it is to get.
Change my mind. I dare you.
Change my mind. That's right.
So when it comes to group disability insurance, you'll see LTD and STD, not sexually transmitted disease, but short-term disability. That means typically anywhere from 12 weeks to 24 weeks, they'll offer short-term disability, which is usually measured on a per week basis and is often, sometimes it's 100% of your income for 12 weeks or 90 days. And that's why we recommend on your personal disability income insurance, you get an elimination period of 90 days because typically your short-term disability will cover that if you've got it. Then group long-term disability kicks in. And again, this is often free or cheap, and they measure how much coverage you have based on a percentage of salary. Most common is 60 to 65% of your monthly income, gross income. And sometimes you can buy up extra. And again, consult with your financial planner if you should do that, but take the base of whatever they give you. And the extra might be free or cheap. And again, I'll be glad you did. But you can't customize these things. Group life, group disability, all these things. You don't get to customize it. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. But it's a perk, it's a benefit. We've talked about the value of that. Now, disability insurance, should you go on claim and pay out, if it's group employer provided disability insurance, if they pay, you pay the taxes on the benefit if you go on claim. If you pay for your own personal disability insurance, it's tax-free if you were to go on claim and collect the benefit. So that's a little tidbit to know. We get that question a lot. Now, something to know, the group disability plan may be shitty. And so you've got to try to get as much on a good personal policy through Principal or Meritas or Guardian, that you can get there. Sometimes they're nice, but half the time they're not even true on occupation. So you got to be aware of that as well.
If you can't take the policy with you, you're not going to have that peace of mind. For me, like this product, the product you should get is something that you own, you can take with you anywhere. I mean, otherwise you're just always tied to your job and the whims of human resources. So if your goal is ensuring your income and protecting your family and your future, you got to control as many components as you can. So you got to get your own policy.
Yeah, and they'll both pay out if you go on claim. So you can get a small, cheap policy if you've got a really good group LTD at work. And then if you go to another job that doesn't have great benefits, you can increase the benefit on your personal one. That's called a future increase option or a benefit update. So that's the other critical piece you got to make sure is on there. But if it is, then you can expand and contract it depending on what your jobs offer throughout the year.
That's right. And examples can be helpful. So let's say you're taking home $20,000 a month and your group disability covers, and it's never going to cover everything that you're taking home because you're not going to need it all, and they're just not going to cover 100%. So
yeah,
let's say they'll cover, right? Exactly. Right. So they don't want to incentivize that. So let's say they cover like $6,000 a month. Okay. With a group disability policy, you could cover yourself with your own policy for 1,000 to 2,000. And there are limits to how much they'll do, again, because the combo amount is what they don't want to over insure you. So that's just a good example. Say it's like 6,000 group disability. Well, you might be able to tack on like 2,000 more or something like that. And then you go somewhere else and you lose that. You get a new job, you move into a different state. You can take that 2,000, you can probably bump it back up to like 8,000 because that's what they were willing to like totally, total insure is up to 8,000. So yeah, well, great. Hey, thanks, John. I got to run here, and it was good catching up and talking some shop. Hopefully it's helpful to some folks. We're always open for questions. I'm available at trevorsmithmd@gmail.com. That's my forever email, and feel free to shoot me any questions.
Yeah. And guys, give us a review and a rating as well, please, on this podcast. That helps a ton. Comment, get the message out and get the word about financial education for young physicians. Let's continue to help stop physicians making dumb financial decisions.
That's right.
This was the Financial MD Show. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.
See you, John. Thank you.
See you later, bud.